What's going on, everybody? This is Techo with ADSR, and we've partnered with Serato to show off the beat making process in Serato Studio. Today we're going to be making a trap beat. If you want to follow along with this tutorial, or you just like the workflow that you see in Serato Studio here, you can use the link in the description to get a free version of Serato Studio and follow along or make beats in a similar process. Like I said, we're making a trap beat today, so let's get into it. So I've loaded up a blank project here in Serato Studio, and by default, it gives us a clean 808 drum kit, which is not necessarily what we want to use for trap. So I guess if we want to get started right away with drums specifically, we could go into our drum section in our library at the bottom here, and we could search through and see if there are any specific drum kits that fit the mold of this genre we're trying to work in. And what do you know, there is a Studio Trap drum kit. Let's load that up and see what it sounds like. Now, initially you saw me trigger some samples with my MIDI controller, but you don't necessarily need to have a MIDI controller because Serato Studio makes things really convenient with the way they arrange notes on just a normal computer keyboard. We can see that each one of these drum sounds are numbered because they correspond to your computer's keyboard. You can play them on the number row or even the letters on your keyboard. So right away, the sounds that I'm hearing are probably pretty good for trap so far, but that's not to say that we're stuck using only the samples that are in these pre-made kits, because maybe we like some of the sounds in the kit, but not all of them. We can always go into drum one-shots and look for specific sounds that we want, and it will preview them as long as this little preview icon is turned on. Specifically, it would be great to find a vocal sample for this kit. Now, I like this one's okay, but I actually want to find something maybe that sounds a little bit different. I actually like that one a lot better. So what I can do is click and drag it and just replace the old Vox sample that I didn't really like. And now we've got this new one. We can manipulate these samples as well. Each one of them individually, we can adjust their attack, which will kind of take away that initial hit, which we don't really want to do for drums. We can also adjust the release, which will make more sense when we start editing some synths. And we can even adjust things like the pitch. So let's bring that. I actually liked it where it was, so let's leave it at 0. Maybe this Vox though, let's bring that down a few semitones. And I might bring the attack up a little bit if I'm getting a little bit of a clicking sound at the beginning of the sample. So there's two samples that stick out to me the most for making a trap beat right now, and it's the kick and that little clap sound, as well as the Vox that we added for an initial pattern. Now, we haven't even set our tempo yet, and I kind of want to go a little harder for this beat than I have with previous beats that I've made here in Serato Studio. So let's pick up the tempo. Let's go pretty fast. And to set the tempo, I can either just change the number manually here, type it in or click the arrows, or I can tap it in. So if you think of like your favorite trap beat or your favorite trap song, and you can really count the tempo in your head, all you have to do is tap that button on the tap tempo button, which appears when you hover over BPM. And I'm getting about 176. I was probably a little overzealous. Let's maybe round that down to 170, or actually 175, and let's listen to the metronome, which I can turn on with this button here. And then once we start playing, I think I can make that work. There's actually a fair amount of samples in here now I'm thinking I'm wanting to use, but I want to play a more full phrase. And right now we're set to 1 bar looping. Like you see that line going across, just keeps repeating in this one section. Let's beef that up a little bit. Let's double it to 2 and then double it again to 4. So now we'll have a 4-bar phrase to play along with. Now you saw me just kind of finger drumming along with the metronome. We could also draw in our notes. And you could continue that process all the way through all 4 bars. I personally, I'm going to clear these notes with the clear button, prefer to finger drum. Even if you can't finger drum a lot of drums at the same time, it's worth just playing in a basic pattern. And then we can add in stuff later. So let's record. I'm going to push this record button, and Serato Studio will count me in 4 beats, and then I'll start. So we're going to have 1, 3. I want to add some more snare hits in there. So we're still rolling and recording. Added some more snares. And it quantized them for me because quantization is turned on. I'm going to turn off the overdub mode now and just find some notes that I want. That click perk is perfect. I'm going to turn overdub back on. I don't love that snare roll, so I'm going to go back to it actually and get rid of this last note here. So now that we've refined our initial drum pattern here, the one thing that is super important, I think, in trap music are those hi-hats. Now, of course, we could program in our own hi-hats. Let's again loop this first bar by clicking that bar so we get that little loop icon. And taking a look at our hi-hats. Now, we could draw these in just by clicking and dragging, and now we've got steady hi-hats. That might be a little bit too fast though, so let's try every other. And that should probably work. But trap is definitely known for its stutters, hi-hat stutters, snare stutters. So if I press this grid button here, it reveals a ×2 and a 3. These represent being able to hone in on that grid a little bit more, and we get even more of a magnification. So we can add in these stutters that we're so used to hearing. Let's use them sparingly. And then the 3 represents triplets, which if you don't know too much about music theory, that's okay, but just know that it's another subdivision of time that can add a little bit of a layer of complexity to your rhythms. So that's one way you could have your typical hi-hat stutters and stuff in here. I'm actually not going to use this technique. I just wanted to show it off for a bit. I might, however, use it on the snares. So let's actually add a couple snare fills here. I use the selection tool if I want to grab notes and highlight them, but I turn that off if I want to draw in notes. So let's try a couple different snare rolls here. That's a nice little stutter there. Let's try bar 2. And maybe let's try adding a couple kick stutters, maybe in bar 3. Cool. Now we've got some stutters in there. We've zoomed in on the grid, but I didn't solve that issue of adding in the typical trap hi-hats. That's because I wanted to do that by adding in a sample instead of using our drum kit. So let me show you what I mean. We go to audio samples. We've got a collection of different types of loops, melodic, one-shots, synth stuff, piano stuff, all that good stuff. But we also have rhythmic stuff like hi-hats. This one in particular is called trap hi-hats, which I think will be perfect for this project. I'm going to click and drag that in. And even though the initial sample says it's 125 BPM, Serato Studio does the heavy lifting for us. And if I just press that 1, it sets it to the proper tempo. Now you can see that the sample doesn't completely match everywhere we go. But I did like the initial part of that sample. So I'm going to favorite this little section. And now I can hit find samples. And I can add in different cue points to the sample on my own as well. So let's actually move this one. Let's stretch it. Now, like I said before, we can even adjust the pitch of these. So let's go ahead and adjust the pitch of number 2. Just to give it that more of a glitchy vibe. Not too much though. Let's play it back. Let's continue to add in some more cue points. And now I've got 3 cue points within this hi-hat sample that I can bounce between and layer over my drums. So let's record these just like we recorded when we were finger drumming. And cool. Now we've got those kind of stuttery hi-hats. We've got our basic drum beat. I think we all know what has to come next for a trap beat, and it's the 808. If we go to instruments, we can now add in an 808 synth. If we check under bass, head explosion. I think we're gonna go with the 808 head explosion for sure. Now, Serato Studio making things easy for us again, because just like playing those drums on the numbers here on the keyboard, we can now play notes in key. Obviously, that's a bit too high for an 808 for a bass sound, so we can use Z and X to go down and up an octave, but let's use Z to go down. One thing you might have noticed is the project started in C minor, but now we're in G sharp minor. That's because the first sample we dropped into the project was this hi-hat sample, and it was tagged as being in the key of G minor, even though it's a percussion sample. And when you do that, the first sample you drop into your project, if you've got no other instruments happening, actually adjusts the key of your entire project, which actually I don't have a problem with. But just remember, you can go back and change this later and it will adjust it for all your instruments. Let's play that actually in D minor. I like playing a really basic pattern like that. Note that we are playing in key here on the number pad, and if we're in play in key mode, that will also adjust our MIDI keyboard as well. Those are the same note that we're hearing, but you can see that I'm actually playing two different notes, of course. And that's because play in key mode is activated, where if it wasn't, we can now play chromatically, and it even gives us a little diagram there of how to play chromatically on our computer keyboard as well. I'm going to leave it in plain key mode though for now. We've got a glide function here on our 808, which actually makes it so the notes glide between each other, which is pretty typical for 808s. We can crank that up. It'll be even more dramatic, but I think right where it was at, like 330, is probably a pretty good spot for it. Cool. Let's record in an 808 pattern. Turning record off. Our 808 and our kick are competing a little bit. I'm gonna help mitigate that by adding a little bit of a side chain to our 808 by activating the effects. And then from this drop down menu here, switching this effects from a stutta fader to a hard side chain. I don't want to go too hard. And not all producers do this, but this is a stylistic thing that I like using for this beat in particular. I think the next layer we should add to this beat is some mallet percussion or some bells. All right, so let's go back to instruments in our library, mallets and percussion crate. And let's preview some of these sounds. I like this anime percussion sound, so let's click and drag it in here. And now before we add this layer, since we've got a pretty solid pattern happening with our 808s, our hi-hats, and our drum kit, let's go ahead and click on our little intro scene and copy it over to this blank scene slot. The way to do that is just by clicking on a scene and then immediately going over to a blank scene slot where you can copy the previously selected scene. Now we can add this layer of anime percussion over it and have both, one with this little bell instrument that we're about to add and one without. Let's go ahead and play with these effects a little bit. Now, some instruments come loaded with effects on them already, but usually they're turned off. So Beam Me Up Echo, Light Tail Reverb, both examples of that. They're on the deck, but they're not turned on until we click them and they turn purple. We can add even more reverb to them. Let's see what the echo does. Adds a little bit of echo. Let's see if we can add some delay though. We can change the time of that delay right here. You hear that pattern changing. Now, individual patterns, we can tweak them, like we can change their volume. That delay is actually sounding like a lot for me right now, so I'm gonna bring it down. My best advice for coming up with little catchy melodies or melodic ideas is find simple patterns and repeat them and then vary them slightly. So if I play that very simple ascending pattern, 1, 2, 3, 5, then I maybe want to find a second pattern to play. Maybe go descending. Adding in that new note. So previously we're going up. Now let's go down and add a new note. I believe this phrase that I'm playing is actually 8 bars long. So what I'm going to do is duplicate our pattern here, which we don't have to go back and duplicate our ideas because it did it automatically for us. Let's go ahead and add this new melody with the anime percussion on top. Pretty satisfied with that. Maybe we could bring that volume up a little bit more now. You don't see any notes in our grid because we can of course scroll through this and find them. Now I really like this. What I probably want to do though is duplicate it. So I'll click on scene 2 and then click on an empty scene. And maybe what I want to do actually is play that same melody but up an octave. Like that. So I'm going to clear that initial one that we just played and I'm going to record again. Didn't play it rhythmically perfect, but we have quantization turned on, so that's helping us out. Let's go ahead and add that hard side chain to this instrument as well. Not too hard. It's probably also worth creating a scene that's just like scene 3. Let's copy it. That doesn't have the kick. Let's make sure we do this across the entire pattern. So I've gone into selection mode. I'm highlighting all those kicks and I'm just pressing delete. Let's get rid of them. And remember, this is only affecting scene 4 that we've just created. This isn't affecting any of the other scenes that do have kick in them. And maybe let's get rid of the hi-hats. And we can turn our metronome off. We don't need it right now. And then we could transition back to a scene like scene 3. And suddenly we've got these little variations on these patterns that all have the same kind of ideas being passed around, but arranged in different ways. And that is how we will eventually come to arrange our track. Specifically for this scene, let's add that vocal sample that we added to our drum kit. Go out of selection mode so we can draw it in. We'll have that little hit. That'll make things a little bit different there. And I think we're probably ready for one more layer. Let me go ahead and duplicate scene 2 because that's kind of our most basic groove. That'll probably serve as our verse. I'd like to add a little bit of a guitar riff. So if I go to guitar, there's one instrument available. Let's drop it in. And now, sounds pretty dry, like it's not really going to match the rest of our track, but these preloaded effects will probably make it sound pretty cool. Definitely some reverb. And maybe not flanger. Let's go ahead and add some phaser actually. I actually like it better with phaser and with no reverb. See, melodies and melodic ideas, they don't really have to be that complicated. especially if they're just like little guitar riffs like this. They don't have to be too complicated. Don't feel like you have to play all the notes that are available to you. Find a few that work together in repeated patterns. Let's go ahead and record that. I noticed that the quantization didn't quite catch us at the beginning there, but I can click and drag and adjust that note. Same thing there. Let's go back to bar 5. Of course, I could have just played it in again properly, but we can also go in and click around and adjust it as well. Great. Let's go ahead and duplicate this scene one more time. And I want to completely get rid of the drums this time around. So I'm going to go to the Studio Trap Drum Kit and press clear. I'm going to do the same thing on the hi-hats. Now we have this nice suspenseful section. And I'll tell you what I want to do next. I want to take scene 3, copy it over, and I want to change up the drums. But instead of me playing in a completely new drum pattern, let's actually use the make drums feature, which generates drum patterns in a particular genre for us. So if I drop down this menu and let's find the trap genre, it will generate a trap beat for us. So I selected trap, let's click that, and you see we get a totally different pattern now. I like that. The only issue we're having is it's triggering this long kick, which is really clashing with our 808. So we can just get rid of that wherever it shows up. This hi-hat is a very triplet kind of feel, which we kind of touched on talking about earlier. I would also say that the hi-hats, we haven't used them yet in this beat, but they're coming through a little hot in the mix, a little loud. So if I select that particular drum pad, that one shot of the hi-hats, we can adjust it individually. And maybe I even want to adjust the key of it. Yeah, I feel that. So now we've got stuff to work with. We've built up 7 very, very basic scenes here, and we could start to arrange this beat. We do that by going to song view. It's already put in a section of intro for us. So if I click the skip back button and click play, we'll start playing right from there. And now we can drag and drop our scenes. But maybe I actually want to double that intro section. And let's drop scene 2 in right here. And one idea I had for scene 2 was to sort of trigger a reverb on one of the snares in particular. And we can do that with automation. Let me show you what I mean. So in scene 2 here, let's go to our drum kit, Studio Trap. We've got our claps. That's what I meant. We're going to trigger the reverb on the claps. And we can adjust things like automation, like make certain effects happen at certain moments in time by clicking this robot icon here. And that gives us the option to automate a bunch of different effects, including the effects we have loaded up here below and our basic EQ and gain. We can even automate the key shift and the tempo. But I would like to automate the drums reverb, which is FX3. And I want to automate it so that it's on right there where that particular drum hit happens. If I activate it and turn it on now, it's not going to do anything because the dial is all the way down. But let's go ahead and draw in that automation for drums reverb on. So now we've adjusted that specific moment in time to trigger that reverb. And it doesn't happen anywhere else. We could automate it to happen other places, but I don't think we need to right now. But just know that that is the way to be automating specific effects to happen at a certain moment. Use that drop-down menu after clicking that robot and automate any of these parameters. Click that robot again, and we're back into editing our clip. But like I said, I got distracted and we were arranging. So let's go ahead. We were here going from an intro section to scene 2. Let's just go right in order for now, and we'll go to scene 3 right from scene 2. We'll go to scene 4, scene 5, 6, and 7. And these scenes, exactly how we've built them, now exist on this running timeline, which we can eventually build up to be a whole song. And if I click on master, we get a view of what our master track looks like in real time. We get access to master effects as well, which as I dial those in, like a master compressor, we'll start to see it affect the waveform, or a limiter, for instance, which will add volume to our track for sure. And a brightness EQ, which I don't think we necessarily need for this track, although it doesn't sound half bad. But we can go ahead and repeat some of those sections. We can build new sections once we start to build out this arrangement and say, it would be nice to have a B section here, or it would be nice to add, an additional section with a different groove. Anything like that. We can always go back to our scenes, build up some more, and then drop them into our arrangement view. From there, let's say you had a rapper or somebody to go over this beat, you send it to them and they send you back an acapella. You can add the audio right here. And right in Serato Studio, you can finish your track. For exporting, all you got to do is go to File, Export, and you can just export the track as it is, like if you were going to send this beat off to a rapper. Or if you want to send it out for mixing, mastering, open it up in another program and go a little bit deeper, you can export the stems, which is each individual instrument, including you have the ability to export each individual drum pad as a stem as well. So that's a quick look at how to build a trap beat in Serato Studio. If you want to see me work in a couple other genres and also touch on some basic music making fundamentals, check out some of our other videos with Serato Studio. But for now, my name is Nick Tatro with ADSR. Have a good one.